Hello and welcome to COP30 in Brazil. We are live from High House for the COP30 sessions. This year's climate change conference is, of course, taking place in the Amazonian city of Belém. Delegates and negotiators have been sweltering in heats for the past few days of nearly 40 degrees, and that's just inside the venue. But other than a few malfunctions with the air conditioning, it's all quite deliberate. Organisers wanted to show the world not just the Amazon, but the real impact of climate change on ordinary people around the world. People in cities are some of the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. But it's in urban centres that we produce roughly 70% of carbon emissions. So, we're here today to talk about the role of cities and climate, and I couldn't have two better guests to do it with. I'm delighted to be joined by Tainá de Paula, Deputy Mayor for Climate and the Environment in Rio de Janeiro, and Mark Watts, Executive Director of C40 Cities, a network of nearly 100 global cities who represent nearly a quarter of the world's economy. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Tainá, let's start with you. Obviously, you represent Rio de Janeiro, not Belém, but nevertheless, it's a Brazilian urban centre. Why does it matter to you holding a COP in a city like this? And what do you want people to take away?
I think that's really important. Listen, people. Look, I'm a black woman. From the global south, so that's important to make the climate agenda with another person that we are not listening today yet. So I'm from Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro, that's an equal city, and we must to lead with 100 people that can lead this climate agenda for the future.
Yeah.
On the periphery, on the slums. I think that's a new role in this climate agenda that we can make with this person.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, obviously, Belém, it's a long way from the glitz of Dubai or the, seaside resort of Sharm el-Sheikh that previous COPs have had. When you look at a city like Belém, but also developing countries around the world, um, how does climate change affect developing countries differently?
Well, first, I think it's been an inspired choice to bring the COP to Berlin. I think most people coming from the rest of the world didn't know what to expect, but they get here and find a beautiful, thriving city, a very large city.
Yeah.
And that sense that if we want to protect the Amazon rainforest, which we must for the whole of the world, then the key to that is creating good jobs and prosperity in the towns and cities around the Amazon, so that there isn't the incentive to get involved in the destruction of the rainforest. But I think the challenges you see here is everywhere. Climate breakdowns are already happening, really affecting people in everywhere in the world, but particularly global south cities. Every mayor I know now is talking about heat, particularly in populations where lots of people work outdoors all day and now unable to do so, and where the meal on the table in the evening comes from working out in the day. This is life and death already.
Yeah. Just staying on that topic though, a lot of green measures taken by cities that you hear about a lot. It would be, Copenhagen's cycling infrastructure. It's Melbourne's urban forests. It's things which take money to do. And the reality is that in a lot of cities in developing countries, there's just not as much money to do things like that.
It's true, and it is definitely an outrage that the cities and countries that have done least to cause the climate crisis haven't got the resources to now deal with the effects that they're feeling most. But what you see at a city level is just an amazing amount of innovation. The mayors of these of cities in the global south are not waiting for someone to give them a handout. They are setting leadership and now inspiring the rest of the world. You see the way that Freetown, Sierra Leone, has now kind of reforested the city to protect it from floods, but to create a whole new bioeconomy from almost no investment whatsoever, now attracting in Rio, where we were all delighted to be last week, a city that's 2/3 of the space is green, and where they're still expanding green corridors to provide shading and beauty throughout the city.
Tainá, tell us, do you think it makes things more difficult politically if you're from a city like Rio de Janeiro, which is an incredible city, wonderful city, but it does have areas of quite extreme poverty? Is it politically harder to justify spending money on environmental measures when there might be people who are saying, well, hang on, there's basic infrastructure that we need to be spending money on first?
I think we have a challenge of the gap funds. We don't have money for make all the adaptation agenda and the mitigation agenda that we need. So it's always a challenge. We can we we don't have the money for increase and do our projects
Yeah.
like our parks, our urban parks we are making in Rio de Janeiro on the periphery and favela. And in another way, we can we lead with the how can I say that uh, the cities around us they don't have the money either to lead with the agenda too. So Rio de Janeiro, that's a point with like islands with a little access with finance, and we don't have the mechanisms and money for put in another cities that are poorer than us.
Yeah. Yeah. But do you think there's possibly the more understanding in a place like Rio or like Freetown about the importance of dealing with climate change rather than in the global north? You know, you're sat in London. Like me and Mark are from London, and we don't feel the impacts of climate change as acutely. Uh,
I think that women are leading a new agenda. I'm looking for Marina Silva. I'm looking for Hidalgo. I think that women, excuse me, Mark, are making a difference because we can join the, of course, the finance agenda with the careers agenda. How can we lead with the support of our communities? We have a program in here that we called Guardians of Forests that are porous women that have leadership in their territories, and they are creating projects and local plans with the voices and points that we increase in their own territories. It's I think that's the future of the reunion of the biggest plan, the uh, the the plan that we can, uh, how can I say, uh, constructing not um, building.
yeah.
You can say building.
Yeah.
We can build in year per year, but talking about the challenge
Yeah.
that we are living in the territories.
Exactly, exactly. Well, Mark, a question for you. If you look at cities, they are reducing their carbon emissions faster than national governments are. Well, why do you think that is?
I think, I mean, first and foremost, it's because cities are compelled to act on climate change because mayors are responsible for running services, and those services are already being affected by climate breakdown, and because their citizens demand things like clean air, which have the impact of cutting greenhouse gas emissions. But actually, I think the bigger thing is you see a very different type of multilateralism at the city level. We just had this incredible gathering in Rio just last week, mayors and governors coming together, and whereas nation states have allowed themselves to get sort of pulled down by negotiating down to the lowest common denominator, what's the thing that everybody agree on, which has to be the absolute minimum? Mayors have adopted a collaboration that's just based on listening to each other, learning from each other, copying the good ideas, and racing to the top. And it's meant everyone being more ambitious.
I guess so. My question would be, how much can mayors really necessarily take all that credit? Because a lot of climate emissions does come down to national government policy. It's about the grid. It's about the energy mix. It tends to be the case that city level, you're making decisions about transport, about parks, and that sort of thing. So I guess how much of that reduction is down to urban leaders, and how much of that is down to national governments, all these big global meetings that we have at COP and so on.
Well, I think the headline stats speak for themselves. I think 73% of our member cities are cutting emissions faster than their respective nation states. When you look at it per person, and most of these big cities are growing very fast, the rate of emission reduction is 5 times faster than the global average. So something has happened that's very different in these C40 big cities than is happening in the rest of the world. But also, they're not confining themselves to the traditional things that mayors would do. Tokyo has just announced, for example, we asked all of our mayors to come to Brazil and not talk about pledges for 10 or 20 years. What are you going to do in the next year? Tokyo is building a wind farm that will power 900,000 homes. That's the city of Tokyo, not the government of Japan. Or you look at in London, the largest clean air zone in the world, the whole of metropolitan London, 10 million people now breathing cleaner air as a result of that policy at a local level. And because when the cities work together, so the way we've seen on electric buses, for example, it shifted whole global markets. The Latin American cities were told by the European, North American bus manufacturers, we're not interested in providing you with clean vehicles until 2035, 2040. The mayor said, no way. We're having them now, and now the biggest market for electric vehicles, electric buses outside of China is here in Latin America.
Yeah, just picking up. I mean, you were mentioning your meetings in Rio at the C40 last week. They're a guy not all our viewers will have heard of. It's the United Nations Special Advisor and Assistant Secretary General for Climate Change, Selwyn Hart. But in UN circles, he is kind of the man in a lot of ways on climate. Now, he said that he would he was pledging for cities to be recognised in global climate negotiations. I think that's what you are doing here at COP. You're sort of pushing to have cities formally recognised in climate negotiations. I mean, they're complicated enough, aren't they, Mark? Why are we...
We don't want to be part of the negotiations themselves. But so we had this amazing gathering just before COP in Rio, 300 mayors, loads of governors, but tons of business leaders, civil society leaders. It was an official part of COP, but it was happening before to get a sense of sort of dynamism and action. And actually what Selwyn Hart said, told us two things. He said, one, you, the cities, must over-deliver, because what the nations have promised is not nearly enough to get to climate safety. So you've got to over-deliver. But the other half of that equation is, if we're going to over-deliver and we say yes to that challenge, then we want a space here at the COPs each year, which is the main gathering of everybody on climate action. Not to be in the negotiations, we're not interested, but as what Brazil does is shift away from negotiation to action. We want to be a formal space every year so we can bring the pipeline of projects that cities want and need to deliver and find the partners to finance, find the partners in business to come and work out how to deliver them, find the national governments that will work with us to accelerate the rate of change that the mayors are willing to deliver themselves.
The cities need to participate of these decisions. I think that's all of them talking about the national level. Understand that city have an important point in part of the discussion, but we don't city to talk about our problems and our solutions. So I think that's the COP of implementation. So we need to put cities and local leaders to decide and debate together.
Fantastic, fascinating discussion. Thank you both very, very much for taking part. That's all we have time for today, but there's lots more happening here at High House over the course of COP30. We'll be looking beyond the headlines to the issues that really matter. Do join us for more.